Hi everyone, welcome back to the Empty Pantry. If we haven't met before, I'm Amy, and I'm here to help you turn your tight budget into a delicious meal. Today we're talking about Christmas breakfast. And if you're like me, ideally you sleep in a little bit on Christmas morning, and then you enjoy a really nice breakfast with your family that morning. Now, if you don't want to get up at 5 a.m. to prepare that breakfast, we're going to need to do a little prep work the night before. So today I'm going to share with you 3 of those recipes that I like to make Christmas Eve for a very nice Christmas morning. None of them are hard to prepare. They're all quite simple, and the family will enjoy every single one of them.
Today we'll be making 3 different dishes. A bacon and cheese strata. We'll be making a ham and cheese quiche. And then finally, we'll be making an eggnog French toast bake. That one is super good. Let's start by making that bacon and cheese strata. So we're going to start with some bacon, about half a pound, depending on how much you like bacon. You could use a whole pound if you wanted to, but whatever you choose to do, we're going to get that fried up. And once it's nice and crispy, we're going to want to put it on a plate with some paper towels. This will help absorb some of the extra grease. We don't want like extra grease in our strata. Now we're going to chop it up into little bits. The idea is we don't want anyone to have to cut through the bacon and the strata. So little 1/4-inch strips of bacon. And once we have those all nice and chopped up, we're just going to set them back on the plate. Just set them aside until we're ready to use them in the strata layers. Now moving on to the bread portion, we're going to get some bread. It doesn't really matter what kind of bread you use. I usually use a thick sandwich bread, but you could honestly use an old French bread or whatever. It's going to soak overnight, so if it is a little bit stale, that would be fine. It really doesn't matter what bread you have. Even if you had some old heels, you could do it, but you want the equivalent of a loaf. Now we're going to set those aside and we're going to move on to our eggy piece of the recipe. So I'm going to take 6 eggs and I'm going to put them in a bowl, and I'm going to add to that 1 cup of milk. You can use whatever kind of milk that you want. It doesn't really matter. This is just adding an extra liquid for the strata to absorb. And once you have your milk in there, you're just going to beat that up. You want the eggs completely beat into this milk. Now set those eggs aside for a moment and get out your casserole dish. And we're going to take that bread that we took the crust off of, and we're going to make a layer across the bottom. And basically think of this like a lasagna. We're just going to layer the different ingredients in. So a nice solid layer of some bread, and then we're going to put the egg milk mixture on that. That is going to soak in overnight. Now, just to ensure even distribution, I took my pan and kind of tilted it to make sure that the egg was completely across the bottom. On top of that, I'm going to add a layer of bacon. I'm going to have a couple layers, so I'm not going to put all of it in at once, just part of the bacon. And then on top of the bacon, I'm going to put a little bit of cheese. I used about 2 cups in the entire strata, so about half of it-ish on this strata because I was doing a 9x9 pan. So depending on how big a pan you're doing, how many layers you're doing, the amount of cheese you use will be a little bit different. And then on top of that, just like a lasagna, I'm doing an extra layer. So there's another layer of bread. And then we'll do the egg mixture. And then once again, the bacon and the cheese. So just continue the process like you would a lasagna until all of your ingredients are used up. And you'll just want to finish the top off with some cheese and a little bit of bacon. If you've used all your bacon, no big deal. A little bit of cheese on top will be just fine. And then if you do want to add a little bit of color at the end, you can add some parsley. It doesn't add a ton of flavor because it's so little, but it just adds a little bit of color. So sprinkle a little bit of dried parsley across the top. Now that we have that all ready to go, we need to let it sit. So we're going to cover it with some saran wrap and we're going to set it in the refrigerator overnight. And this will help the bread absorb all that egg mixture and it'll get nice and soggy. And that's really what we're looking for in this. And then the next morning, we're going to put it in the oven and we're going to bake this at 325 for 50 to 60 minutes. We're looking for the egg to be completely cooked through, so you can poke the middle to make sure that it's not still raw eggs in the middle. And then you're going to let it sit for just a little bit so it can kind of set up before you cut into it. And then you can cut into it. And then that's what our bacon cheese strata looks like. Now let's make that quiche. For this one, we're going to fully make it the night before. So we're going to start with 4 eggs in a little bowl. And then we're going to add some salt and pepper to the eggs. We're going to slightly beat the eggs until the yolks are broken. To the eggs, we're going to add a little bit of milk, about 1 cup of milk. The thicker the milk, the better, so even half and half or cream is really good in this recipe. And then we're going to mix that together. Once it's combined, we're going to set that aside and we're going to move on to our pie crust. Now I'm using a pre-made pie crust. I keep these in the freezer specifically for quiches. They're really nice and convenient. They're very inexpensive. Now, if you wanted to make one from scratch, that of course is also delicious. It does take a little bit more time. And then to my pie crust, I'm going to add 1 cup of diced up ham. I'm using like a lunch meat ham, so nothing really super fancy. You can use any type of meat you want. Sausage and bacon are also good options for this. And then I'm going to add about 3 green onions that I have sliced up. This adds a really nice mild flavor to the quiche as well as some really nice color. I'm making sure that those onions are evenly distributed. They don't move too much once you start baking it with the egg, so you want to make sure that they're evenly distributed at this point. And of course, we wanted to add some cheese to our quiche, so I'm adding a little bit of cheese, about 1 cup of shredded. This is a Colby Jack. The sharp cheeses are really good in this, so a sharp cheddar is really good. Even a feta is really good. Anything with like a pungent flavor is yummy. The Colby Jack is just a really nice melty cheese, so I'm using Colby Jack. That's what I had in the fridge, so that's what's going in this quiche. Now that we have our filling ingredients, we're going to pour that egg mixture across the top of this, and we're just going to be kind of gentle. We don't want to move the ingredients around too much, but we're going to pour the entire egg mixture all over the top before we put it in the oven. Now we're going to bake this at 375 for about 40 to 45 minutes. We're looking for it to be completely done. We don't want any raw eggs, so you can test it to make sure that there's no raw egg in the middle. Once it's completely cooled, we're going to put some saran wrap on it and put it in the fridge. In the morning, we're just going to reheat it until it's about room temperature, and then we'll serve it with some fresh berries. It makes a beautiful breakfast for the next day. Super easy, and it is so delicious. Now for a more sweet option, some eggnog French toast. So we're going to start with a casserole dish. I have a 9 by 13 dish. I'm going to coat it really well with some cooking spray. I did use a butter flavor cooking spray for some extra flavor. You can use whatever kind you like. And then we're going to move on to the bread. So whatever bread you have, you need a loaf of bread. I'm using some Texas toast. It was a very large loaf. I ended up not quite using the whole thing. About 12 slices is what I used, which was, I don't know, like 80% of the loaf. It didn't hold the whole loaf. A loaf of French bread would be really good with this. Now, just like our strata, this is going to sit overnight in an eggy mixture. So if the bread is dried out, that's perfectly fine for this. It's going to have plenty of opportunity to absorb some of the liquid. Now, I'm showing you that I'm trying to cut the whole loaf of bread. I'm just going to cube this bread. Like I said, I didn't end up using all of this. It was just way, way too much. We're looking for a whole casserole full of bread. So how much ever that is for your casserole dish, I'm just going to cut it in cubes. So for this bread, it was in 9, so 3 by 3. Then once those are cut up, I'm just going to fill my casserole dish, and then hopefully you don't have too much extra bread, but you want it nice and full. And then we're going to move on to our egg mixture. So I have 6 eggs that I have put in a separate bowl. And to that, I'm going to add 2 cups of eggnog. You could use milk if you wanted. And then a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. And then we're just going to mix that up really good, just like you would when you're making French toast. You want to make sure that the eggs are completely beat into that. And once that is beat in, we're just going to very gently pour that over our bread mixture as evenly as possible. Try to get the top wet with the egg if possible. You will have another opportunity to try to push it in there, but this is really tried to get that egg mixture all over the top. So gently pouring that entire thing of eggs all over the bread. And then once you have that in, we're going to cover this with saran wrap. And once the saran wrap is on there, we're actually going to kind of take our hands and press that bread down into the egg mixture. This is your other opportunity to try to get it nice and wet. And then into the fridge it goes. It's going to stay there overnight until the next morning, Christmas morning. We're going to bake it at 350 for 45 to 50 minutes. We're just looking for that egg mixture to be totally baked into the bread. And then I topped it with a little powdered sugar and a little maple syrup. And so it's like French toast, but with an eggnog twist. So it makes it extra Christmassy and extra special.